Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And first things first, I think this is the first time I can remember when there were so many people intending to vote for parties whose core principles they don't really agree with. Lifelong Labour or Conservative voters like myself and Michael Heseltine are opting to vote for Liberal Democrats this Thursday. Some may be voting to opt for other parties such as the Green Party or Change UK. I mean, I've already voted, but it will be counted this Thursday. And the reason is because the election is not being viewed as a way of placing representatives into the European Parliament to push for our desired agenda, as it's supposed to. That's normally what we would vote for. But on the single issue of Brexit. After all, if Brexit goes ahead, we won't have any representatives in Europe, so it really doesn't matter what party they're from. Now, in that vein, people want to know how to vote tactically. Now, the best way to do this, as a number of people pointed out, is to use the website remainvoter.com. And it's not perfect, but it is pretty good at telling you which party to vote for your region. And it's definitely better than going in blind. If you want to have your vote count as a Remain vote, then use the site. But I will point out a couple of things that the site itself makes clear. This is not a site telling you how to vote. It will just say, well, vote for this party if you just want to use your vote for Remain. It's only providing advice for that situation. So if, let's say, for example, you might be a Remainer still, but you want to vote for a particular candidate or a particular party for your own reasons, you don't want to engage in the concept of using it as an indicative vote on Brexit, then of course do that. Don't let people tell you how to vote, for goodness sake. Similarly, if you want to vote tactically, you are happy to vote tactically, but the party it's recommending you think, oh no, I don't like them, then vote for a preferred party. Again, you shouldn't have to hold your nose before you vote. So with those provisos, remainvote.com, was it remainvoter? Remainvoter.com, get it right. If you Google it, it definitely come up. Now the second piece of work is, is the steelworks in my adopted town of Scunthorpe that I was discussing yesterday has now gone into insolvency. In fact, it's gone into liquidation, I hear, which is worse than administration because it basically means that's that. That basically means the plant is going, even though they keep still talking about finding another buyer for it. So I'm not quite sure about that. But what I will say is nothing I'm going to say is going to change it. So I'm going to leave that issue for this weekend to focus on Brexit, other than to say that it was always going to be a bad thing. I heard that workers were paid for May yesterday as opposed to the end of the month, which was basically being told, we want to do this now so that we make sure you do get paid. Because once it goes into insolvency, then there's no guarantee that they would be paid after that. But as I say, more about that at the weekend, including the issue of state aid rules. People are saying that the government couldn't have bailed it out because of state aid rules. That's a load of rubbish. But anyway. But it wouldn't have been so much easier, if, as I said, the big problem here we've got is that people in this area voted Brexit. They've now voted for the closure of their major industry. And what I will now say is, now that it's been brought home, I mean, we've seen this across the country. Now that it's been brought home here, it will be interesting to see how people in this region vote. If they still vote for a significant number of Brexit candidates, then when they've had the reality of Brexit shoved right in their face in a very timely but cruel manner, then I won't even know what to think. But it would have been way easier if Jeremy Corbyn had applied core Labour principles and got behind a public vote with Remain as an option. Polls put the Brexit party as the most likely to gain the largest share of the vote. Now, that's not to say a majority vote, just larger than any other individual party. But those same polls that say that if Labour had have got behind a public vote, Labour would come out on top. They would win. But Corbyn doesn't want a public vote. He wants Brexit. He thinks that the lives that continue to be destroyed by Brexit are expendable. After all, he's not getting blamed for them. The idea of thinking an ideology is more important than human lives is something I associate with conservative thinking. Although I know it also exists on the far left as well as the far right. But I never thought to see a Labour leader exhibiting it. I really didn't. And I am ashamed to say that I seem to lack the literary skills to adequately convey my contempt for this creature. But unfortunately, Labour now will, rather than unite the country, which is what he says he wants to do, split it. They will split the Remain vote between people who will vote Labour thinking, well, they're really a Remain party, which they sort of are if you take the leadership out of it, or people who recognise, like myself, that a vote for Labour now, because of the leader's position, is a vote for Brexit. And that's for those who are even going to be allowed to use their rights to vote. There are a lot of eligible UK citizens who have been stopped from doing so. We're not covering ourselves in glory at the moment, are we? In fact, the only thing we seem to be covering ourselves with is milkshake. Not only were many Britons living abroad a few years ago not permitted to vote in the referendum on the very important matter of their own citizenship due to a rule about residency, but now even eligible Britons living abroad are not being permitted to vote in the EU elections this week. As long as a UK citizen has been resident in the UK for some time in the last 15 years, they're eligible to take part in the UK elections, no matter where they happen to be at the time, no matter where they happen to be living. Naturally, postal voting is the way to manage this, but many people living abroad have reported only receiving their ballot papers yesterday, 2 days before the elections. Not enough time for it to arrive for the count, because that can take 7 to 10 working days. Now, the reason for this appears to be that some councils have used a firm called Adair as opposed to the usual Royal Mail to deliver them. The bottom line seems to be that thousands of Britons living in France and other countries, Spain I think is another one, are now being denied their democratic right to vote in the European elections. The only options, I suppose, would be by sending it by urgent courier service, which of course would cost, or an emergency proxy vote, if you know someone back home who could vote for you, but even then it needs a signature, so I think they'd still have to come across. And both options require a significant amount of work on their part, who should simply need to tick a box and post an envelope. The Electoral Commission has said that it isn't involved as its councils responsible for distributing the ballot papers, which is true. The councils themselves have said that they were all sent out last month, which may also be true. But the problem is that this company they've sent them with used them, they sent them on a fairly roundabout route via the Netherlands. So you've got like Britain and France, they're sort of next door. But you've sent it over to the Netherlands where it's taken several weeks, very circuitous route to get to where it needs to get to. Yeah, what's that about? Now, what are we to take from this as well? Have the councils in questions been deliberately attempting to prevent a group of people much more likely to be pro-EU and vote for pro-EU parties? Or are they just incompetent? Both of them are pretty serious. If we run the most likely explanation that the councils just tried to save money and were too dumb to use a service that was fit for purpose, then what it still means is, even in that scenario, you've got a modern, wealthy, democratic nation being incapable of carrying out the logistics of allowing eligible citizens to take part in democratic elections. Instead of everyone just trying to shrug off responsibility, surely we should stand back and say that actually something needs to change there. And yet I'm not even saying anyone saying, well, lessons will be learned, which is the usual brush off that we get when something terrible is allowed to happen. Oh, well, we'll learn lessons. No, you won't. But we're not even saying that. Not that that would help the people who've had their vote basically stolen from them. But what if it was deliberate? It does hark back to people who were not allowed to vote in the original referendum because they'd not been resident in the UK for the last 15 years. Now, a rule that might just be justified for elections of representatives, even though there's an argument against it. But I see no reason why any British citizen living abroad shouldn't have representation. But I especially see it as making no sense at all on a binary referendum, which is essentially about citizenship rights. If you're a British citizen of voting age, you should be able to vote in such a ballot, really. And then there was the issue in the original referendum of private companies handling the ballot boxes in the Brexit referendum, who lost like nearly 1 million votes that were never counted. They were just misplaced, mostly from pro-EU areas as well. But I guess the chances of there being an inquiry into those areas leading to recommendations for change to avoid the situation are pretty remote. After all, There are other serious electoral failings that are being swept under the carpet, and what's one or two more? So anyway, those are my last words before the European elections. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.